Hey everyone, welcome to Hacking Your Leadership, the new series around leadership book authors, something that we have begun here in 2025 and are super excited to continue for the entire year. Today we have a very special person, not only somebody who I think is an amazing content creator, an author, but somebody who is a part of this partnership with us and the Lions Guide, and that is Flip. Welcome back to the show, Flip. How you doing, man?
What's up, bro? Good to be here, man. I'm excited. I'm excited for all this new stuff and this partnership, and I am happy to be here, man. Good times.
All right, Flip. So for those that maybe didn't tune into the first episode that we had, kind of introducing the partnership with Hacking Leadership Alliance Guide, give us the maybe 30-second, 1-minute background about you.
Yeah, so 24-year veteran, originally born and raised in Buffalo, New York. Really was living in three different worlds when I was in the Navy. I was in both the medical, the aviation, and the special operations in some capacity, and learned all these different leadership styles, saw all these different leadership models, and really, brought that to Lions Guide afterwards. And now I'm the managing director, and we're really just setting off kind of where we're going with it.
I love that, man. I think it's great. And there's so much to unpack here and talk about. And I really want to jump right into it. So the everyday leader, right? You've referenced this a couple times. That kind of like leadership is for and about everyone for all different types of things. And I really appreciate how you've broken this down in the content. So like, let's just start there with kind of the first couple of things from an everyday leadership standpoint, the core beliefs. Like, talk to me about these core beliefs, why they're so important and why you have to start here.
The first two ones that are in that are leadership starts from within and giving what you want to gain. About 2 years after I had retired, I figured I needed some type of a quote, right, for myself to go, what was it? And so that quote ended up, when I got done was, ended up being honesty, consistency, and transparency from the top down builds trust, loyalty, and respect from the bottom up. When I designed the Everyday Leader course, I had to start from the core, right? Where this leader is coming from. And so, leadership starts from within really looks at who you are, because if you don't know who you are, there's no way that you can go out and lead in any capacity. Like, you have to figure it out. Or you're going to end up being hollow, right? And then give what you want to gain, which is that other part of this core belief is, what are you trying to give to other people? What are you trying to not only get out of them, but knowing that you got to give that first, right? Like, you have to be able to say that. And so the quote enables those two together by kind of really bringing it together. Like, look, just be honest, be consistent, be transparent, because you're going to get that trust, that loyalty and respect that you're looking for, and everybody's going to kind of be there. And so the first two in core beliefs really, the benchmarks really dive deep into kind of figuring out who you are and then figuring out what you want to get from your leadership experience.
I love that, man. It made me think about the idea. I've read this somewhere about intellectual honesty, and that be the antithesis of like fake it till you make it. And it's kind of the idea of like, are you willing to be honest with yourself enough to know what are your strengths, what are your opportunities, what are the things that you say but you don't do, and then what are the spaces that you have to like really take that in to be able to go forward. And I think it's such an important concept. We use so much on the podcast with our 1-minute hacks and like self-reflection. Take the time, write this down, think about this. How would you do that? How did you do this? And what could you have done? And so when I hear you talk about these core beliefs, and really this being at the foundational element of where you go from here, I think they are so important. And I think that they sometimes we can jump over them quickly and we don't spend the time to really consider not only how we show up for each other, but how we show up for ourselves. And then we rarely ever do temperature checks on asking people, how am I actually showing up for you? We like the surface. We like the tell me I'm doing a good job. We like the give me some feedback to make me feel good. But the real aspect of it is like, what's the impact that I'm having in somebody's life? Is that going to drive them,
It happens all the time in leadership that you just get so focused on the mission or what you're trying to get done that and the monotony and kind of the everyday thing just happens that you don't have time to look back or you don't, right? And so, but knowing from the beginning of who you are and how that translates to everybody else. And then knowing what you really want to get from your people in that same foundational aspect. When I put it together, I just thought it was such an important thing that you had to start with no matter what, because then, well, no matter where you go, it'll apply for anything, right? Like this thing to me, I can look at that core belief and say, I can apply that to my children, right? Like if I'm honest, I'm consistent, and I'm transparent with them, right? As much as you can be as a parent, right? Then I'm going to get that trust, that loyalty, and the respect that we're all trying to, right, that we're looking for. So it is, and Lions Guide's real mantra over it all is just, it's applied throughout life. It's not just applied at work or at your business. So great points. Thank you.
I love that. I love that. Let's move on to core abilities. That's kind of the next stop here on this content.
Yeah, so I used the total play on word, right? Like, so abilities used over and over again, but I broke it down into 3 points. So core abilities for yourself, core abilities for your team, and then core abilities, and I usually put it in air quotes, but for your company. And that could be whatever size. You don't have to be the business owner. You can be the organizational leader, kind of, for it applies. But really, the abilities, like for yourself, right? Observability, responsibility, and accountability. Those are all, if you think of it as a target, those are really going to be at the center of things that you have to work on, right? I have to work on how I'm observable to my people. Am I there all the time? Do they see me? I have to relate to the responsibility, knowing that I have these things to do. And then the accountability. Am I doing the stuff that I am, and am I holding them to the same point? So that was like the inner circle kind of portion of the abilities. And then when you move to the next ring, you end up ending with, the core abilities for your team. So now this is the next step out, where you look at dependability, where now you're leaning on someone else to do something. And that's an ability that you can work on. You're looking at availability, right? Like they say in the NFL and sports, the best ability is availability. And the same thing's here, right? Are you there? Are you present? Are you engaged in what you're doing? And then the last one, I think it's the most important in the team, is the relatability factor. You're bringing in X amount of people on your team. They all see the beach ball in a different way. How do you relate the entire thing to make sure that that the mission is getting done and that you're able to do that? So the relatability piece is also, it's a lot of the why. Like, why are we here? And you're going, oh, I'm going to show you that you're important because I'm going to relate the top mission down to what we do down here in our department. And so the team was really the second ring. And then when I got to the company, the air quotes parts, that was really the biggest one. And I'll tell you that the core abilities for your company were driven a lot off COVID. Because what we saw at COVID was people who had no idea what to do, how to pivot, how to change, how to adapt. And so adaptability being the first one of saying, we have to have our department, our company, whatever, we got to be able to make a small change or adapt to what has just changed. And if we can't. And so when you can't, or when you have something like a major thing happen, then you get into the weatherability part where you're like, all right, we got to weather this storm. How are we going to do it? And here's the last piece that most people don't do. They don't then go to sustainability part to go, okay, everything has now changed. What else has to change with it? Is it salaries? Is it people? Is it like they don't sustain what they're doing because they were never meant to do it in the first place? But the pivot, the event changed so much that you can lose that. So when you take all the abilities together, you look at them from the context of, the closest to you to the next closest to the outer whole, you really have these abilities that you can work on and focus on each one and go, okay, what do we need to do? So a great example, the company one, do we have things in place if stuff happens? Like a lot of people don't. They just think it's gonna, go that way. And so those are the things I really wanted to find, actionable items that a leader could go, I can target these things and make sure that I'm doing each one of them well. And that's really what the core abilities were all about.
Yeah, I love that. I think as you were talking, I was considering in the last 4 years, I don't think I've ever heard the terms, adaptability, flexibility, agility. Like these are things that really underscored the need for businesses and for leaders to be able to move and to move in a way that is different. That is now the bar of expectation is different from the working force, from the people that work for us, from the communities around us. Like there's just a lot of things that are being required of change, and that ability to not just make the change but to sustain the change and then kind of grow from it that you called out is phenomenal. I want to talk a little bit about the core applications here and kind of break this part down of the everyday leader. But I really want to make sure that we pause for a moment here and we talk about spam. So start where you want, but we're going to take some time to talk about spam.
Yeah, we will. So, okay, so if the core beliefs were, I'll equate this to the body, right? If the core beliefs are your heart and the core abilities are kind of your muscles and everything else, the core applications, what I didn't want to do when I did this was I didn't want to just give out theories without giving things that people can actually apply and do, right? So think of that as your tool. Your applications are really your toolbox. And so I always wanted to start with building your foundations, because a thing that happens all the time is that you take people get off their original North Star really easily. I use the example all the time of a pizza shop that's making the best pizza in a town. They get said, man, why can't you make calzones? Why can't you make antipastos? And then all of a sudden, they're not making the best pizza, but they're making all this other stuff, and they've really forgotten they're brilliant on their basics. And I got it from General Mattis, and he had kind of really talked about the Marines of, every Marine, no matter what, is a rifleman. And I thought, your business people need to know that they got to remember your core, remember what you're really there for and why you guys are there, because that's kind of going to be your North Star. That moved into kind of learning your flexibility. So leadership has all these paradoxes, right? Like, how much time do you spend on the floor of the manufacturing, as opposed to not being a micromanager, or right, all these different things that you have to be super educated at, as well as letting your people kind of being empowered to do things on their own. And so that flexibility of just being able to bend to what's happening, right? Like, they're never really called out to that effect. And another great one in there is we operate in the gray, right? We have all these black and white things, but leaders operate in the gray. So being able to be flexible and operate in that gray is super important. I'll leave this spam until the end. I'll just cover the other two. So the other one's the art of simplicity. We have innately in leadership, we make it probably more difficult than it needs to be to some degrees. But at the same time, we don't take advantage of what other places. A great example is NASA, right? We could all probably agree that being an astronaut is a very technical, requires a lot of intelligence, but you'd be surprised to know that every single thing that they do is simplified down to a checklist. And I thought to myself, why don't we do that? Why don't we simplify leadership down to be able to use a checklist of even the fact of like, hey, on Fridays, I want to go and make sure that I recognize someone for the good work they do, but that's not written down anywhere. It's a memory item, and I don't want it to be. Simplification of stuff is, break it down Barney style in leadership, not just your job, but your leadership portion of it. And then the last one before we get to spam is really about people don't understand their authority, nor do they understand about empowering people and allowing those people to lead upwards, right? And so it's a lot about, I use two specific words here that I call out. I don't like the word culture, even though I know it's true. I know culture means something. I like to look at what I call ROW, which are results-oriented work environments, and those are small pockets. So if you can change and you could make a small group within your company empowered, and that what you'll end up seeing is that every group, if they're that way, then the culture just comes naturally on its own, and you don't have to push it, right? Because nobody wants to hear about culture. We don't talk. It's just something that does that. So let's get to spam though, because it's one of my favorites, and to be honest with you, it's one that I never saw anywhere ever. Like, I don't know that there's a course out there that talks it. So spam stands for sex, power, alcohol, and money. And the simplified way is to say that I have not, and I challenge all your listeners and all the viewers, please flip at lionsguide.com. Go on and tell me if you found a situation that a leader wasn't taken down by either something to do with sex, something to do with power, something to do with alcohol or drugs, or something to do with money. Because I haven't seen it yet, and they all revolve around that. And so we dive into each one, and really, it's not about just calling it out. It's about putting active things in place so that you as a leader can be prevented for that.
There's so much to talk about in there, but I do want to hang on to this point because many times we talk about the things that can be a danger. They can be the place where people get stuck. There's plenty. Every single person I know can tell you about somebody who's fallen into this trap. Yep. And so you say, well, but then how do people still fall in this trap? Like, if everybody knows these are the things, well, it's because of what you just said, which is we don't talk about it enough. We don't say that this is a thing. And then we don't share the fact that there are going to be, as you rise in your career, as you take on more responsibility, then there are going to be things that you will have access to. There's going to be, financial parts of this that maybe you weren't used to. And these types of new places create the opportunities for one of these four things to show itself. And if you're not prepared for it, if you're not thinking about it, if you're not aware of it, it's really easy to trip and fall into this trap. And it does. It takes down a lot of people. And again, it's hard to say it takes down good leaders because when they do these things, you no longer think of them as a good leader. You're like, oh, they threw all of that away. But up until that point, many times, they are really great leaders. And when they fall into this trap, people put their head down. They go like, oh man, that's too bad. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that, it's rare that it's like they're extremely bad and toxic, and then they do this, and we're shocked or we're awed about it. Right. It's usually the other way around. So I appreciate that you talk about this a lot.
Yeah, and I think two points, clearing points, right? One is that everybody's human. I know we look at leaders and we hold them to a higher standard, but the truth is we're human, and every person is the same. We all put our pants on the same way, and we're all susceptible to it no matter what, right? Like, no matter what it is. And so when I talk about active, right? Like, I have those I know our audio listeners can't hear, but I have a can of Spam that sits behind me in the thing. It used to sit on my desk. That thing is from, I think it's 2015. That can is actually, I would never eat it anymore. But people always ask, what is it for? And I say it. And just by saying that, they know that I'm aware of those things. I'm still susceptible to them. Like, it's not that it's not, but you kind of go, it's out there, right? I put it out there to go that, and then it's not just that simple thing did that. And I think the other point to me is remembering that you're a servant, right? Every leader is servant. It's a servant leader. You're doing what you can for the people that you have the privilege to lead, right? And I use the word privilege, the word privilege all the time in that, because it's a privilege to be a leader, and you have expectations around you that people, right? And what happens when you falter? You nailed it, right? Like, then they become not a good person, or they become not a good leader. And the truth is, America loves this, a comeback story too. So it can happen. The human side kicks in, and it sometimes is unavoidable. But I think the more you're able to put it out there, like the more wall you have and protections you have from it, right? Like, it has to invade a few levels before it's really gonna matter. And that, again, you said it. People don't talk about that enough, because nobody wants to. It's the bad stuff. We want to keep it positive. I can keep it positive by telling you that those things are the ones that take us down, and just knowing it. So it was important. And again, real side note, I didn't realize how receptive people were going to be to it. I thought it was a little bit silly of a thing that I had learned from a mentor, and people just took off and were like, oh my God, this is awesome. And I now know of about probably 25, 30 people with cans of Spam on their desk at work, and great, it's working. That's all I care about.
That's awesome, man. We'll tell our listeners and subscribers, like, where can they find you to get this content, to get more of your content? Where should they be looking to be able to engage with you?
Yeah, so lionsguide.com is the website that we have to. Right there, you can see a bunch of different things, a little bit more about us, a little bit about what we're doing. And literally, you can actually sign up for the academy there as well if you wanted to do that. We're on LinkedIn. Obviously, we're on LinkedIn and most of the socials. If you just Google Lions Guide, you'll probably find us there. And you can always look me up, Keith Griffin, on LinkedIn too, as well, and to see that page. So we're not hard. If you see the purple, and you see the logo of the face, you know you're at the right place.
That's awesome, man. And if any of you have enjoyed this conversation, which I'm sure many of you have, a part of the partnership that we have with Lions Guide is that we're going to have some additional content. We're going to talk about the pillars and pitfalls of leadership. I know we talked a little bit about the SPAM acronym here, but there's more to this, and we're going to have that in the Lions Guide Academy. So if you're looking for more content like that, and if you're excited to learn more about the application of these theories and these books, that's where we're going to have our content live. So again, check out lionsguide.com and the academy there. And thank you all for listening and checking out the show. And Flip, thanks again for coming on and providing some great content and context for our leaders out there listening.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, y'all have a great day, and we'll talk to you all next time.